Hey guys, it's been a while. Right now, as to why it's been a little bit short on videos is I've been looking for jobs since graduation, and Nick's been off doing like some summer internship stuff, so just decided I would record a solo cast over the next few nights or so, just in this particular one talking about my 3x3, which for anyone who doesn't know, for anime is like your 9, not necessarily favorite shows, at least how I interpret it, but more like these 9 shows I like and are like a core part of me and represent me in some way. And my knowledge of anime is not super vast, nor is like how much I've seen. I've probably completed about 70 shows, I think, according to my Mal. I've seen well over like 200, 300, either ongoing or like partially then dropped. So it's like I'm not new necessarily, I'm just not super in-depth into what I've seen yet. So my 3x3 is going to change a lot as time goes on. And I was thinking I might as well document it in the state that it's in now, which I think I made it last month in May of 2022. I figured maybe every once in a while I would update it, maybe make sequels to these, but for now, I just want to talk about 9 shows I really like, and, 9 interesting stories about myself, I guess, through these shows, and what I appreciate about them. I would eventually expect these 9, like, a lot of these I think I could make into full, like, very long scripted videos, which I am also still working on, but I have not touched in quite a while because of the previously mentioned, like, job stuff. I have no idea how interesting this is going to be because I am leaned back, relaxed in a recliner chair, or reclined in an office chair, not even reclined in a recliner. I've taken some Sudafed to help with my cough, that I've had for like a year now. It sucks. Also, everything's going to be time-stamped, so you can just skip to whichever shows you like. I'm going to be going into spoilers for them. I'll try to make a warning if I go into super heavy spoiler territory for a lot of them, but I feel like it's necessary to really cover the in-depth for a lot of these. But they'll be appearing on screen in my 3x3 as you see them, so if you don't want to be spoiled and just want to see what's happening, you can kind of just go one by one and then skip the shows that you're not interested in hearing me talk about. And yeah, all these shows are obviously a recommend to most people, with a couple of exceptions on the list, but I'll get to those when I get to those. I've gone off tangent like 4 times. But yeah, it's like 1 in the morning. It's nice and cozy. I'm a little tired, but fuck it. I'll start with the first one now. So the first show I have on my 3x3 here is an OVA of Cutie Honey called Cutie Honey. And what's interesting about it is that it was animated by Gainax, who has done Evangelion, Gurren Lagann, quite a few other what's the word I'm looking for? Famous shows. Like, they're very high name shows, that's what I was gonna say. Fooly Cooly. A billion I haven't named because I just cannot think of any off the top of my head. Besides, Ava, Gurren Lagann. They became Trigger as well. Did Kill La Kill as like one of the big works that I like as well. That one's not on the 3x3, but it honestly could be. I have to rewatch it though. As well as Little Witch Academia. But what's really interesting about this is this OVA is from 2004, but it's of a property that has had many, many adaptations going back to the 70s. And this is essentially Gainax's take on the Cutie Honey universe, and it's a 3-episode OVA. The setup is kind of like a Astro Boy situation, where you have like an android robot, this time a daughter instead of a son, like created by a scientist in order to save the day. But I think, and I don't know the history on this entirely, but she's one of, if not the first really big, like, female protagonists, and, in, anime fashion, it's a very sexual show. Particularly, I mean, I don't know a ton about the original show, but this Gainax OVA, very, very sex-forward, but in a very funny way that's hard to explain, unless you've seen it, but definitely would not recommend this as a introductory anime or anything like that. This is something that you do not want to watch having no experience, because this is like, I won't say it's obscure, but this is very very anime feeling, very otaku oriented, where it's just kind of does weird stuff that you accept because it's anime at a certain point. Like, I was never really off-put by this, but even if this was like my first show, I probably would not be able to handle it. But it's hard to explain, but very entertaining in that, like, it reminds me a lot of Kill la Kill, in that very overly sexual way. Kill la Kill has, like, a lot of themes tied around clothing and nudity and sexuality, whereas this is just kinda, it's just there as supplementary material. But I very much enjoyed it. Give this like a 9 out of 10. But it's, I'll look at my notes here. Oh yeah, I also, there's a story behind this recently. As I was watching this, I went to my local thrift store and I found a Cutie Honey figure. I have no idea how. I think it's from the 2000s as well, so right around this time. Not the design from the show, or from the OVA, it's from the original Cutie Honey, but it's like one of two. I'm gonna show it on screen here at some point. It's half of a corresponding figure, and so they only had that one at the thrift store. They also had like a $600 like Kiss Sis PVC figure, so I'm assuming that someone died or something and their stuff got left there. That, or someone was forced to sell them, like going into a marriage or something. But it was very cool to see. It's sitting on my desk right now. Like, I'm looking at it as I'm talking about it. It's, if you take a look at this, you can kind of get a tone for like what the show's kind of like. It's very sexual. But I also got it along with a Barack Obama, which should also be in the picture. And so I was there with a friend, and he was like, yeah, this is like your birthday, so I'll buy this. And that was cool. So I have Barack Obama, and then this giant anime woman from this show. It's, just the color palette in this show is absolutely beautiful. It's probably the most beautiful color palette I've ever seen in any show. It's very vibrant, almost comic booky. It's just so beautiful to look at, and because it's an OVA, there's just like so much time and polish that's been able to put into these like 3 45-minute episodes. Versus something like a serialized television series where you just have to go. This was marketed as, you buy the DVD, you see it, there was no need for like a mass appeal, essentially. Which is what I like about OVAs, now that I'm starting to get into them a little bit more. Like, I'm watching Gunsmith Cats right now, for example. That's also very cool. It's a very 80s, 90s thing, OVAs are. I don't know why I'm telling you that. You probably know that, but in case you don't. Yeah, this show is just, it's very pretty, it's very funny. A lot of the characters are very cheeky in that, like, Gainax / Trigger way. It feels way more modern for this company than, like, you think it would. Like, it very much, it lies way more on, like, that early Trigger feeling, more so than the late Gainax feeling that it was. And I love Gainax, I love Trigger. This show kind of embodies everything I love about all of their works, which is just, you know, their core, like their emotional core, is pretty incredible. It just has its own unique flavor and feel to it that really hasn't been done a lot of other places. And I've been looking a little bit into the history of Gainax and Trigger, and it's very cool. This feels like, not that it's lesser known in like a very obscure way, but this is like a lesser talked about Gainax project that I really do appreciate. It feels very old, but at the same time, the Trigger spin on it makes it just feel, or not Trigger, Gainax feel. It feels fantastic just watching this. I would recommend giving it a try, watching the first, like, half of the first episode of the OVA, wherever you can see that, because I remember having a hard time finding it online. If that's not up your alley, then it's not for you, but if you enjoy pretty colors and, like, balls to the wall, like, superhero comic book, feeling, like, sex haha funny, this is just a very, very fun show. And somehow emotionally resonant with me, but I don't know entirely how to explain it yet. But it's very cool. I like a lot about this. And just, I guess, the energy that Honey Kizuragi gives off, which is the main character. She's very cool. She's like, that's the weird thing. One last thing before I go on to my next one. It's very, sexualizing of the main character, but it doesn't feel, like, degrading or to the detriment of her entirely, even though on paper it absolutely is. You'd have to see it, but for some reason to me it doesn't resonate as she's being, like, degraded. It's more like self-sacrificing. And it's, anytime it's done, it's mostly done for laughs, but it's in a very entertaining way, and I was surprised by this, because I went in watching it, I was excited to see it. Oh, that's the other thing. If you can't find it online, the opening is an absolute banger, and, like, the opening is like the animation quality of the OVA plus 15% or something. It's very close to what you'd be getting with that. So if you look up the Cutie Honey OVA on YouTube, the opening, you'll be able to find it. Find something at, like, you know, 480, 720p, and just look at the colors, look at the movement. There's so much passion behind it. I finished this like a week ago. And this feels like some of the details are already slipping away a little bit. But it is quite the entertaining, like, superhero story, essentially. And if you enjoy that, it's made me interested in checking out a ton of other Cutie Honey stuff, so I'm gonna go eventually watch most of those. And I might do, like, a whole series video on Cutie Honey, just as a general property. So I would look forward to that if I eventually get around to it. I'm still mostly working on the review video right now and rewriting it and like actually getting it done. And then there's one that I would do way more soon on this list that once I get to, you'll know. It'll be number 6 in case I forget to mention it, because I'm just going left to right, top to bottom. The next show on this 3x3 is JoJo's Part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable, which, you know, a lot of you know JoJo. I think everyone knows JoJo. I like JoJo. I think a lot of it is good, but I wouldn't say is like super memorable, super great, except for Part 4, and this is going to go into a lot of spoilers very quickly because I don't have a lot to say on this one. But I think it has one of the best villains possibly ever, definitely in JoJo's, in Yoshikage Kira, because he just has a very creepy yet grounded energy to him that's just, it's very captivating. He is a weirdo, you know, about hands and all that, but he doesn't feel out of place, and what's interesting is that because he is so grounded and normal, in a show like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which is so balls to the wall crazy all the time, he feels really creepy because he's just so methodical, which is a very not as much seen kind of character type in JoJo's for whatever reason. He's laying in the background for like the entire anime part of Part 4, and it'll cut to him a couple times, but you never really feel like he's this big endgame villain. Just that like eventually, you know, our protagonist will cross him at some point, and just in the meantime, you kind of get this build-up of just he's this really weird businessman, like normal businessman with a weird side. That's basically his character, but his stand is also named after one of my favorite bands, Queen, and it's 3 parts, so it's like you have the whole regular Killer Queen, then you have Sheer Heart Attack, and then the 3rd part is Bites the Dust, all famous Queen songs, and I thought that was really cool. One of my favorite things about JoJo's is the band name stuff, which I think a lot of people like, but especially me, like being into classic rock quite a bit, it's like I'll recognize the names. I feel like I'm like some tourist on like some crazy like rock and roll attraction. Like I'm going to the Hard Rock Cafe and I'm just like, oh, there it is. There's Queen. There's Bad Company. There's, oh, Limp Bizkit, I guess. It's very cool. And even though it's really novel, I think it's just cool that for aesthetic purposes, he just goes like, I'm gonna name things after my favorite bands and kind of design powers around them. Apart from being just like a general cool action series, it's like JoJo's just, again, tonality wise, this one is very lighthearted. It leans a lot into that slice of life kind of feel, which I do enjoy quite a bit. I've been watching K-On!, but I'm not anywhere near enough finished to put that on this list. It will maybe get up here on my top 9. But it has this very lighthearted feel apart from like the last arc, where it's just people dicking around town. And it's my favorite part about stands, where it's just, we get like semi-weird powers after part 3 in this one, but a lot of people just use it to like just cause mischief and be like greedy dicks. Like Shigechi uses it to take a ton of money. There's some kid with a hole in his face that his stand, it's like if he beats you in rock, paper, scissors 3 times, he steals your stand, which means I think you die, if I'm remembering correctly. But he also gets like your stand's powers, which is crazy. It's like some kid that just wants to be really good at rock, paper, scissors got a stand, and so it just revolves around his, like, him playing rock, paper, scissors, which is really funny. And it's so powerful that Rohan has to say, okay, you don't remember how your stand works, you can't ever use it again. sorry kid. And so just little things like that. Mikitaka, who's like the alien stand thing, we don't ever know. There's just a lot of like little things where you feel like this little fleshed out town, just they all have these crazy powers, but in a way they're not using them for evil or for anything crazy. It's just, it reminds me a lot of like more of a sitcom than a actual like grand scale adventure, which it's like, you know, a majority of people who had powers would go around messing with people. I think they wouldn't have anything grand. It'd be, you know, even Kira, it's like he doesn't want to use his powers to take over the world. He just wants to like keep hands in his house and fingernail clippings and be gross with them, and that's fine, you know. He just doesn't have any crazy, it feels very grounded, I guess, is what I enjoy about it. If you can't tell already, these are going to be very rambly and very all over the place, but I'm hoping that it just, if I get enough ideas out there, you kind of get the point. Especially because it's like, I'm just sitting here at 1:30, and this is the easiest way for me to like get my ideas out. The duality between Josuke and Kira's powers is really cool too, because it's like ultimate creation versus ultimate destruction, or restoration rather. So they can undo each other's powers essentially in an instant, and so they've reached this impasse where it's like Kira has messed up and, you know, people have found out his identity, but he can't destroy the evidence anymore because there's someone who can just instantly bring it back. And so it's this like small town showdown feeling at the very end that I really like, apart from like the general overall, where you get like 39 episodes of also 3 separate JoJo's, Joestars are in this, which is amazing. I wish Joseph wasn't as senile because I love him as a JoJo. But it is just really cool to see all 3 of them there, and just kind of having that generational back and forth. It's just a fun time. Like, I would highly recommend it, even as a standalone. It's just a very fun time, which is what I'm looking for in media. I mean, greater messages as well, but these first 2 have been kind of more lighthearted picks. And these next few are going to be more of like the deep cuts. I've been kind of warming up to them. Unintentionally. It's just how they were ordered in the 3x3, but that's pretty much all I have to say on part 4, because most of it's already been said. You can see all like the analytical stuff and people, you know, jerking off how good its writing is, which I agree with. I'm not good at jerking. My arm's tired. My verbal arm is very tired of the JoJo jerking, but I promise the show is not just Zawoldo memes. It actually is pretty good. Stand battles are just really complex social interactions, and it's very fun to watch and very fun to kind of keep up with the mind games and think about it. So yeah, definitely recommend. And that's pretty much why I like it. Lucky for me, it seems that my cough medicine is working quite a bit, which is nice. The next show on this list is Serial Experiments Lain, which very, very famous show. Anyone who knows me probably would not be surprised that this is on my list. A lot of its storytelling is very like atmospheric and mysterious and not at all straightforward for the first half. And if that's your vibe, I would say generally watch it. Apart from that, I am going to be going into spoilers again very quickly on this one, because it's been everything that has been said about Lain has kind of been said. But it is a very, very cool psychological, like, techno story. It's about a girl who becomes one with the internet, essentially. Not in a literal way, except kind of, but also more of a metaphorical way of she, excuse me. She has a different personality online than she does in the real world. And so we don't exactly know what this means at first because it's presented like very odd, where you cannot tell which one is which, and you know, it's like, are there actually two Lains? But it's like she's just kind of borderline schizophrenic, but also it's just, you know, you're different on the internet from how you're different in real life. And this show was made in 1998, same year I was born. And yet it accurately even models the internet compared to now. And I find that quite impressive in like the layers of depths it goes with. Even there's a guy who has like computer strapped to his face. So it's like, you know, you got the VR there. That's not as common of a thing with like people having an overexposure to like technology, but in a kind of not one-to-one tangent. It's like, it's kind of like looking at your phone constantly. You get absorbed by the internet, and it really showed like how the internet would be integrated with our lives, which it was at 1998. It was getting that way, but in a way where it's like you have it with you at all times. The wired is everywhere. The idea of like, you know, I think it's nanomachines in the air that like actually carry the internet. And so that part on a surface level is pretty cool, but it felt like I was unraveling a mystery with this one. I watched the first 4 episodes, I think 4 times before I kept on moving. And it's really fascinating. It's so hard to put into words, but just the tonal ways they represent just like Lain's confusion and non-understanding of the internet world, and like what is real and what is not, which, you know, the ultimate moral at the end is that they're both real. They're just different, but they're at the same time like one and the same. Like the internet and the IRL you are both you. They're separate, but they both affect each other. And they both have presences like with each other. I think I don't hear this one talked about quite a bit, but it's one of the second half episodes, like episode 8, episode 9, somewhere around there. We just get like a full-on documentary for some reason. To explain the backstory, it's like you get like snippets of what the technology is and how, you know, the world came to be with all these nanomachines and all that. And it's really, really interesting because you just like, this is a fucking documentary for a fake world presented like, you know, a 1980s, 1990s, like direct to VHS documentary about a world that doesn't exist within this show that has up until this point not shown anything like that. And that was just fascinating to me. It blew my mind that like they would go to that kind of length. But in the end, it turns out, you know, Lain is an AI and she's not actually a person, which is why Wired her and real life her are so different. Is like it was actually segmented, and at the end when she realizes what's happened, you know, she resets the world somehow. This is still vague because I haven't seen it in quite a while. The important part of this, though, being that as you see throughout the series, Lain goes from not having hardly any computer at all, it's like a really old model, to having literal pipes and like cyber tech and this crazy shit just in her room. Like she's been fully absorbed by the internet, and there's one point where she has like literal wires in her connecting her to the internet. And it's just, there's so much cool imagery in this show that I really appreciate aesthetic storytelling. and just cryptic, like, dense imagery, because I think it says so much more than what words can, as evidenced by me. Like, I'm just saying, go look at the show and it'll explain itself for you. Like, when, you know, not all people think that way, but it just means a lot to me. That kind of storytelling, because it's such a, like, specific yet descriptive and impressive aesthetic that you get what it's going for. And just, like, it's almost psychedelic, like the metaphors it has for the internet and, like, losing yourself, the impact you have through it, and all these side characters that just get enthralled and enraptured in this and meet Lain and, you know, treat her as a goddess online. It reminds me a lot of, like, Twitter users that have, you know, 3 billion followers that in real life they just they're like, oh, I got mayo on my burger, I can't go talk to the person. It's like, it's that. It's so perfect. Like, not just specifically that, but just so much more like that. It's just, like, both because of how descriptive it is with this aesthetic storytelling and just how accurate it is. It's so entertaining. That's not even talking from, like, you know, an actual narrative, like, surface text and non-subtext level. That's also, if you enjoy cryptic stories, I find it very satisfying, but do not expect to watch this just once. If you can't tell, I went to the bathroom during the middle of that take, and I am, like, kind of full of energy now, and I have refreshed myself a little bit on the show. The opening, too, also iconic. It's all in English. It's, I forget which one's the band name and which one's the song name. It's either Boa by Duvet or Duvet by Boa. I think it's the second one. Don't quote me on that, though. It's just, it has a very, like, early 2000s vibe to it, with, like, you know, the indie alt-rock opening, which, like, you don't see at all in anime openings. It's all in English. It's, like, an English band. The imagery with, like, the crows and, like, all the wires, and it's beautiful. It, like, in the way that people have made Evangelion their aesthetic, this is very much like Lain is such a strong aesthetic for the internet. Like, let's all love Lain. All that is just incredible. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's like all these references to Lain. But you get it, you get it. It's... I would have to sit down and watch the show like a good 3 times to really do it justice. It left me not super confused. I don't get it. Like, I get it, but I don't get it. There's so much to get out of this show that I'm grasping at surface level details right now, but, like, I can tell, and even though I can't, like, verbalize what I know, it's like, there's stuff there that, like, even from rewatching the first couple episodes a few times, like, you can really tell more and more stuff about the story, about Lain's friends, about, you know, the subtext, all that. It's like, there's something there, like a nut waiting to be cracked, that, like, so satisfying. Like a layered cake. You just know every time you're gonna go back, it's gonna be like a different flavor. And you're just gonna get a little bit of a different bite, and there's so much, like, cool shit that just is... Oh, it's enveloped in it. It's so good. Watch it as blind as you can. If you've listened up to this point, like, you know, there's been some spoilers, but I don't even remember the details of, like, certain episodes. It's just, like, you see it, and it really is, like, a life-changing experience. Even just from a base aesthetic perspective, and not even, like, what do those aesthetics mean perspective. It's it's genius. I can't justify it at all. I grasp for words very hard. I tried to make some analogies or something, but you know Lain. If you don't, like, this is a 10 out of 10 show. It's classic. Everyone should watch it if you have any interest in tech or the cyberspace. I just think it's very important, and I will definitely do a video on this at some point. This is not early on, but at some point. Like, I've done a minute review on it, but it was kind of shit. But those are my fresh takes-ish on Lain, is that minute review. I'm going to link it here probably in the bio. Not the bio, what is it called? The iCard. So you can see that for like a 60-second, like, bullshit. Those are my initial thoughts. I think I used like a 4th dimensional tesseract in there somewhere. Yeah, that's all I really have to say on Lain for now. I think I'm going to do the next one on here, and then just call it a night for now. Number 4 is Gurren Lagann, which, as I said before, but in case you skipped it, I love Gainax, I love Trigger. I'm not super deep into their catalog yet, I've just kind of hit the top hits so far. I'm watching Fooly Cooly right now, but it's just, Gurren Lagann embodies like the human spirit in such a precise and unique way that resonated so well with me. When I first saw this show, it was after I was taking a break from anime, right during COVID. This was like one of the first shows I had watched in a long time. Had not ever seen it before, and honestly was feeling quite down as a person. Was not succeeding very well in life, and was down on myself. And then my friend, we had watched a couple episodes before, but he was like, we should finish Gurren Lagann. You know, Nick actually was just like, we need to watch some Trigger shows. And I was not super big into Gainax Trigger stuff. This is Gainax, sorry, but I mix them up as the same company. It's not that I didn't like them, it's just I didn't super resonate with Gainax as like a company because I just hadn't seen enough of their shows. So this was like a very eventually I probably would have watched it, but Nick was like, you should watch this now. Episodes 1 and 2, Kamino is probably the most charismatic character that I have seen ever. Where I've like immediately clung to him. He really steals the camera and mugs the camera in just such a very grasping way. I'm not using descriptive words enough, but he's so cocky, but also competent and suave that he's just like, he is the ideal man in terms of manliness. And it's not that I want to become that, but he just is so forward leading. He just brings out like a smile in everyone, and he brought out a smile in me, just, you know, getting out from the underground. And basically, recommendation on this is just, if you like Kamina in the first episode, second episode, and like I did, you'll love this show if you haven't seen it somehow. But other than that, I'm gonna go like straight into spoilers. The first few episodes are not incredibly entertaining after, like, you know, they get above ground. I take that back, actually. I misremembered. It's like episode 1 and episode 2, they're above ground fighting beastmen. Then there's this one episode with Rosyu where we go down into the underground village and, you know, they sacrifice people to keep their population under 100 so that, you know, the kids don't die. And it's just like, the way the characters react to that is just incredible. Like the way the whole thing's shot in like almost black and white, but not really. And just that whole tonal setting is just a really good direction for that whole little mini arc. There's just one episode with hot tubs and bikini babes. It's kind of funny. It's not memorable at all, apart from it existing. And I saw a Twitter clip yesterday where the guy Kamina's like, okay, I'm getting out of my gunman, show me them tits, and then they're in bikinis still. So he was like, fuck, that sucks. And that's all I saw of it. But it reminded me of that like OVA, which has like some cameos in it, like from some Rei and Asuka lookalikes and other Gainax property shows. But we get these like fun episodes with Kamina, and then we get to the first like big, like first of the 4 big bosses of Lord Genome, and Kamina dies, which I had been spoiled on, but that scene just still hits so hard. I've heard the sentiment that he like resonates protagonist energy, and I never understood that. He never seemed like, and this is probably because I had all this context going in, not like an immense amount of context, but just Simone seemed like the stereotypical, like, becoming a hero, and like Kamina was his mentor almost, but like maybe like duo protagonists. But still, knowing he died, it was such a sad scene, seeing his sacrifice, and just, he left a hole in the show, and I was very tempted to stop watching. I was like, he's gone this early. I thought he just died at some point, but it's like episode 9. And there's, you know, 26 episodes or something, and I just was so bummed, because he had drawn me into the show, and I didn't know at the time, but it's like his charisma and his like motives for living and what he does is just the entire theme of the show, and something that I kind of carry with me now because I resonated with it so much. And just the idea of, even if something seems impossible, you got to go for it. Not because it makes any sense, but just because you only got one life. It's like, why not go for it? Doing improbable odds is like humans' best thing to do. It's what we excel at, is fighting the odds. And I thought that was such a cool mentality, and me being like a little bitch and being sad about COVID and not doing well in life. It's like, not even in the man up way, but just in like a get your ass in gear. It's pretty good. It really resonated with me. And then there's this whole arc, you know, where Simone eventually fills Kamina's shoes, and it's like, that whole thing is supposed to prep you for like, this is how you become Kamina, and you follow in Simone's footsteps. And he's not entirely like Kamina, he's more rational. He's not pure emotion, pure gung-ho. He has like reservations and will not like overexert himself, but he takes the good parts of Kamina without like the carelessness. He has like plans going in, but he has that emotional confidence by the end of the show to like push him forward and make the decisions he needs to. Also worth mentioning that a like sister piece to all of this is Best Guy Ever's Gurren Lagann video, where he talks about like all these overarching layered themes that, I mean, I could repeat here, but I would not do nearly as good of a job there. If you haven't seen it, I'm gonna put up like a little iCard thing here too. I have no idea if it'll work. I'm writing it down in my notes right now. But he does a great job explaining all of that. It's like over an hour long, and that's something that you should watch after you finish the show. If you haven't already, and if you're here, I imagine you already have watched the show, so watch that if you haven't. So it's like, because it's not a dumb fun show. Like, it, people will call it that. I was never convinced it was a dumb fun show and just that, but the Best Guy Ever video definitely convinced me even more so. It's like, this is a very layered, nuanced, and intelligent show. And as someone who didn't understand, like, how my mind worked for a while, really understanding how to, like, embrace aestheticism as legitimate, like, argumentation was very helpful, because I went by the books for a long time. I'm not, like, I'm good at being bookish, but it's not my natural state. It's like, I have a scholar state and then my normal state, and there's, like, not a good in-between. But it was cool to, like, really flex my emotional side, and, like, from this show and from that video, learning just that is valid and valuable perspective. I mean, on top of all that, it's a good action show, you know, that's standard mecha, but it's so much more than that. And it does sadden me that people don't see it that way. Some people don't. I don't really have much else to say on it, honestly. I feel like I've covered a lot of it, but it really sparked my love for animation again, and got me back on the trail of just watching, like, older shows. And it's weird that Gurren Lagann is an older show, because that was a new show when I started watching anime, along with, like, Code Geass and all that other stuff. But it's an older show now, so yeah, time's a bitch, but keep on going. Gurren Lagann, it's good, 10 out of 10. Changed my life. I figured I'd do one more while I'm up, so that way I have these 4 way bigger shows that are at the end, and then these 5, like, not as in-depth ones at the beginning, because I had, you know, Jojo's and Cutie Honey, which are not that they're not in-depth, but, you know, I gotta keep things moving, and I didn't have, like, a ton of interesting stuff on the top of my mind about them. But number 5, this one's kind of a unique pick. Megalo Box Nomad, recently. I was so impressed with this. I had seen season 1 and not really been super excited about it. Season 1 was a standard, like, boxing show. It was created as a anniversary thing, I think, to Ashita no Joe. I think it was the 50th anniversary. That's why it was created. And it kind of is like a weird retelling with a lot of, like, flavor and new characters thrown in. It's like a reimagined universe, essentially. But, you know, the main boxer is still named Joe. There's this whole annoying dog metaphor in the first season where it's like, yeah, the boxers are like dogs, you gotta train them, and they're wild dogs, and it's all about trust and blah blah blah, and Scorpion on the frog and beats you over the head with it. It sucks. I like metaphorical storytelling, but when it just comes down to just telling you the metaphor and being like, that's what the show is like 50 times, I'm just like, shut the fuck up, please. I don't want to hear this again. And so I'd say, like, the first season was like a 7 out of 10 because of a lot of that. And in no way did I expect this season 2 to go as crazy as it did. I imagine this will fall off of my 3x3 eventually. But for now, I just wanted to spotlight it. Season 2, if you haven't seen it, watch season 1 of Megalo Box, which is a pretty decent show, to watch Nomad, which blew my socks off. First of all, a lot of, like, there's this really cool technique they use in the entire show, which is that they draw everything, I think, in 1080 and then downscale it manually to 480 to make it look older, which, like, yes, fidelity-wise, it technically looks worse or whatever, but it has this really cool old show look, particularly in the first season. Second season, it looks a little different, but it goes for this older aesthetic on purpose, which I hadn't seen done in any show yet. And it's like we're getting to that point where we've had digital clean crispness for so long. It's like that fuzziness is almost an aesthetic, kind of like, you know, pixel art is for games. And so I thought that was cool that they went through that like time to go downscale it and make it like an older show. But season 2 is interesting because spoilers for season 1 and spoilers from here on out. Joe, our main character, becomes champion of boxing. He wins everything. I don't think he lost a single fight, had no struggles. He seemed like an undefeatable machine. I had no worries for his future at all. And so the ending of that was like, where do you possibly go from here? When I heard there was a season 2 announced, because it's like the main adversary rival is like in a wheelchair, and the guy's done with boxing. He has the championship belt, and he's like off running his boxing camp with, like, you know, the kids, and it's like this happy ending. Season 2 hits you really hard because he's run away from home, he's grown out a beard, and he's just a drunk, pill-addicted mess. Hit rock bottom. They go for like the storyline of a washed up, disgusting athlete who's just turned to drugs and can barely hold himself up, basically. You know, is vomiting in like the alleyways. It's very humbling. You look at it and you're just like, what happened to Joe, man? You just see him at his weak point, nowhere to go. He's just fighting in like back alley boxing rings, and you know, he loses, I think, his fight. I'm trying to remember how the first fight goes. He like starts fighting this guy, and then the guy he's going against takes a fall, who will be a main character for this first arc. Chief, I believe is his name. And so Joe is enraged because he's like, he knew he didn't win the fight. So then he confronts him outside afterwards and is like, what the fuck, dude? Why would you do that? And so like he goes to punch him and like immediately gets his shit rocked. He's like, you used to be Joe? This isn't the Joe I knew. You're like washed up on drugs, man. He could tell like instantly. And just from what I remember of like the way the shots were done, it just was like this really heavy, down to earth, downtrodden, just like washed up man. And this was like the call for help, essentially. It was just, you can't even beat this guy anymore. Not that that was important to me. It was just boxing people for fun, to like distract himself and run away from his past. And so after this, or somewhere in this episode, he's like going to the bathroom, going to the hotel, and like you see his old like his like boxing coach, like sitting on the bed with him, like holding up a cross, like dangling. He's like, you know, confronting him about, you know, what a terrible person he's become. And it's weird because you see he has one eye in these, like, where he's sitting with Joe, but at the end of last season he had no eyes, which clues you in on, like, there's something going on here. And, yeah, it turns out, like, Nanbu, his, old boxing coach, is dead. And, like, he's run away from home from it, and he's scared of his past. In particular, what I really like is, like, the first arc and the third arc of this show. First arc is about, Joe's recovery. like off of medication and just becoming a normal human being again, with Chief. And I'm gonna go into spoilers from here on out. Definitely watch it if this has sounded interesting to you in any way. Yeah, Chief, he takes him back to his town, which is like the slums. And the rich people come in and are like, we're gonna buy this lot, so you have to move out. And so like there's that whole like race discrimination thing. And so Joe is gonna train Chief in exchange for his help getting him off meds and alcohol, because he's like destroying his heart and his liver and all that, and just cannot box. So Chief trains up. He wins this small tournament with 3 rounds for his town, and has the money to pay off these like people that are trying to take his home away from him. But I forget what the connection is. There's this guy that does an illegal move, like to bash Chief over the head, like in the back of the head, so he gets a strike. But the idea is like he was trying to get a cheap win, and or after the boxing match trying to get a win outside of the ring as revenge. He just didn't like the guy and like was being instructed. I think this was the businessmen trying to buy out the trailer park because they just didn't like the poor people living there. By the way, this whole park has like this beautiful like Day of the Dead Mexican culture ideology and theming to it that's just incredible. A lot of the show has like some speakings in Spanish and stories in Spanish and songs in Spanish, and just they did this really good job really incorporating all of that. But Chief ends up dying protecting his village because the blow to the back of his head made him not wake up in the morning. And Joe kind of carries that weight with him, going back to his hometown. No one wants to see him anymore because it turns out, he wasn't there for his boxing coach's death, Nanbu. And second arc is like just about slowly repairing those kinds of relationships, but what carries over from Chief is eventually Mac gets like his, or not Mac, I'm thinking like Punch-Out. Joe gets his gear with the hummingbird on it, and there's a recurring theme throughout the entire season about a hummingbird finding its way home, essentially. The hummingbird takes its time and goes out and explores, but it always comes back home. It's able to find its way through like the sunlight or something like that. I don't remember exactly how it goes, but there's a song that goes along with it that is like a constant through line thematic carry, and it's beautiful, it's incredible. And I haven't even talked about like a lot of the third arc stuff, but eventually, he starts repairing relationships. The idea is like Joe is a hummingbird, but everyone in the show is like a hummingbird in some way. And it's all layered. Basically, there's this boxer who's had nanomachines put into him, and it's like kind of illegal research where his name is Mac. That's what it was. He kind of gets angry and goes punchy mode sometimes. They just call it Mac time as like a marketing thing, but unbeknownst to him, the researchers on this like nano machine technology that lets him walk again and box again in his neck has gone like haywire and messes with his nerves, and there's like this whole ethical side plot that is important, but I'm not going to talk about, with like a minor villain and all that, about like the ethics of, this is kind of like steroids and both from that aspect of like cyber enhancements. These in a game about cyber boxing, it's kind of like steroids but also not really. Is it fair? Is it ethical because it's like hurting these athletes, even though it's providing him a chance to box at all? But it is doing more harm than good to him. He's scaring his kid because he's going into like fits. He never like punches his kid or anything, but you know, he'll break things and lose himself and get scared. But eventually, Joe and Mac are set up to like box this final match as like a return of the old king fighting the new king. It's just very cool. Everything ties together. It's not a super unique story necessarily, but with like the Mexican flavor, for lack of a better word, and how cohesive it all is, and just some of the aesthetic choices, and just how much I resonate with like a guy being down on his luck and, you know, getting caught up and like being washed up and making bad choices and having to recover. It's like, I get that. I've been there. It's been a large part of my life for many years, like more in a mental state than a physical, like substance abuse way. But, you know, finding out what I need to do, that kind of a thing. It's just like, oh, it's heavy, but it's a whole good show. I really enjoyed this one, and I was really surprised by it. It is so much better than the first season. It had no right to be, had no right to exist. This ending is much more definitive. I don't remember exactly why, but Joe drives off, and I don't think there's going to be a third season. So I would watch Nomad. If you're looking for an example of like a modern show, that's kind of the point of this on the list, but also just like, it's so incredible. Like, I'm surprised by how few people talked about it, probably because it's a season 2, but you could probably watch this standalone as a season. But season 1 is so crazy, like, different compared to this. It's like, you went from a kind of above average show, but it wasn't super special, because it was just kind of a boxing show, to one of the best things I've seen in quite a while in like newer anime context. Like, this was a winner of its season and possibly should have been like anime of the year. I cannot stress enough how incredible this show is, and I highly urge everyone to at least check out some of it. I wouldn't say it's as life-changing as a lot of the stuff on this list, but at least for me, it could do someone some real good out there. But it's just like, it's such a beautiful story, and everything just layers together and comes back in like these really cool ways. The dialogue is really cleverly written, and just, it's a really solidly produced show, and it has like a lot of a Western feel to it. Like, it doesn't feel anime, it doesn't feel like out there and like has that weird tonality that anime has a lot of the time, which I like. I don't mind it, but this is like, you know how people will say Cowboy Bebop is a good show to show people who don't like anime. I think this is also a really good show to show people who don't like anime. It's just a really good show, and it just also happens to be animated, and it just, it takes itself so seriously, but it has such a way with telling itself. I could not recommend it enough. And it's just, I want more people to talk about it. It's really cool. I wish more people would talk about it. I don't even have like a video to plug from people. I almost feel duty bound to write something about this, but it's been so long and I'd have to go revisit it. Eventually, I might go back to it, but definitely check it out. It's crazy that this is this good. Like, I just cannot believe it. Alright, so I'm back for day 2 of recording. The volume's gonna be a little bit different. I'm gonna try to level it out in post. Basically last night my mic had fucked up, but Number 6 on this 3x3 is Welcome to the NHK, which was my most recently watched anime before Cutie Honey. And this is definitely one of those shows that you either extremely like it because of how much you can understand and resonate with the characters, or it's like completely alien to you and you don't get it and you hate it. Because it's essentially the story of an extremely depressed, shut-in guy who's freaking out, essentially. Paranoid, that's the word I was looking for. And there's this girl, Misaki, who tries to help him through it as the show goes on, and I'm gonna get into some spoiler territory immediately. I would recommend this wholeheartedly. After, like, if you look through like a trailer or something, watch this. But essentially, it's this man who lives this repeated, almost Groundhog's Day kind of life. Not in a literal sense of like a time loop, but every single day is the same. He looks at the same 4 walls, hears the same droning song from his next door neighbor, who turns out to be like a friend that he didn't know lived there and had moved in, but he tries to succeed in certain things. He tries different frameworks and different tactics, and nothing gets him out of the situation he's in. Because this is a very common situation. It's called like being a hikikomori, which is like you don't leave your house, and you're a shut-in, is essentially what it is. You're not employed, you don't, you're not like in school or anything. It's kind of like the word NEET. I don't know the specific differences, but it's the same kind of broad category of you're not in education, employment, and training. You sit in your house all day. You get food delivered to you, that kind of a thing. And a lot of what this character goes through, excuse me, is these ups and downs of life where it's like he'll get out for a little bit, but then immediately sink back into his old habits, sometimes worse than normal. Like he'll get sucked into a game, and start playing like an MMO for weeks on end, things like that. He's someone you're not at all supposed to look up to, obviously, but, you know, for some reason, people will see shows like this sometimes and think, oh, wow, how could you like that? That must mean you condone the actions of the character that you're watching, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, but it's quite a common sentiment, mostly online from people who I imagine are pretty young. But regardless, this is a broken man, essentially. Sato, our main character, like, it comes to a lot of things where he'll get involved in, like, really depressing things, like suicide and stuff like that, where, like, he almost does it. He almost, like, kills himself, but it's like, he doesn't. There's, like, that little bit of humanity he clings on to. But the paranoid part comes from, he thinks the entire conspiracy of him being stuck in his room is from the NHK, which is like a Japanese broadcasting news station. But that NHK stands for something about like National Hikikomori something. I don't remember. It's in Japanese, but the idea is like it's an organization that convinces people and like morphs them to be like stuck inside all the time. It's not at all realistic. In the show, it just looks like he's just kind of paranoid, but in the novel it's based off of, he actually, you know, it does a lot of drugs and it's a lot more darker. This one's more lighthearted from what I've heard, because I haven't read the novel. This is just what I've heard from a couple YouTubers. It is a very interesting watch. I feel like it's a very specific story that's being told here. It's not something that you would really think about as a traditional, hero's journey kind of a thing, or any kind of satisfying narrative. It just kind of happens. Like, this show isn't necessarily, satisfying to watch. It's very painful almost, but in a deeply satisfying way. I know that's contradictory, but it's like, it's not wholly satisfying and amazing. It's like, it's painful, but you can't look away. Especially if it's somewhere you've been before, where like you've been a shut-in before. I've had problems with that, like in college especially. I did not get out very much, so I very much resonated with that, and I feel like a lot of people can resonate with it now that COVID has happened, because it's like, everyone was stuck inside of their house for a while. Either mandated lockdowns or, in the United States, nothing. Where we were just like, I mean, some big cities did it, but in general, it was just kind of like, please stay home, everything's closed. And most people would like keep their distance, and like, it was a very weird world. You've all lived through it, but it's very much that kind of feeling of just isolation, and like a feeling that you can't get out of the situation you're in. And so it resonated with me in both those aspects, and I think on that level, I would very much recommend it. Because it just, like, everyone has that kind of experience now, which before this was like a very niche kind of an experience, but now that, COVID has happened, this is basically the COVID anime. But instead of the situation of, pandemic or something where it's like the world is shutting him in, he just thinks something like that is happening that is shutting him in, essentially, like a conspiracy. So it's kind of close, but not really. I'm probably talking about that for way too long, but you get what I'm saying. Eventually, very big spoilers here, so I would skip to the next one if you don't want to get into this. It's like, we find out Misaki is just as messed up as him, and just for very different reasons, but she has similar, like, isolation problems from people, and she almost kills herself. And so they end up making like a anti-suicide pact with each other, where it's like, if one of them kills themselves, the other one has to. And since they don't want each other to die, no matter how much they want to die themselves, they can't, because they're both holding each other to this like contract. And it's very sad, very dark, and left open-ended as kind of like a neutral ending, where you don't really know what's going to happen, which I really liked. But it was, I think, very appropriate for it. Very much in the spirit of the show, and that it's just like a chunk of life that you're supposed to take in and kind of heed caution from and possibly relate to in some way. And then there's this one other thing I wanted to talk about. I'm trying to remember. I'm going to pause here for a second. Oh yeah, so I remembered. It's where the only thing that gets Sato out of his like rut of a life is that he gets the money that he's getting from his parents cut off. So he can't pay for food or rent, and he's forced to get a job to not die. And this was paralleled with another side character, but it happens to our main character, and he gets like a construction work job where he, directs traffic around construction, and it pays enough. It gets him out of his rut just by force of habit, and we don't know how long it's going to last until like he might relapse. He might continue this way and be fine for the rest of his life. But it's kind of this message of you can't always get out of something by yourself. Sometimes you need a little push from your environment. And the only way that you will change these bad habits is if you're forced to, in order to not die, essentially. The other thing I did want to talk about before I moved on to my next pick was the music is probably some of the best I've heard in any show ever. I think I've said that about maybe one other show on here. but specifically, it conveys like such complicated emotions in a very short span, essentially. Like the music really encapsulates such a very specific emotion, like in one chord, for example. There's this like very famous chord. I'll play it right here. And so you hear that, and it has this very specific like tonality of a little bit of confusion, but sadness and discord. It's very, very cool. And all the songs are kind of like that, but that's probably all I can play because of copyright stuff. Definitely check it out. If you don't like enjoy it after the first episode, I'd drop it. That's pretty much how it's gonna go. Like, if you think you kind of like it, then, you know, stick it out, but it's very much an artsy kind of show, but in a very specific, relatable way, in that kind of otaku way. My 7th show is Toradora. Now we're at the bottom row, closing in on some of the last shows, and this one is your typical slice of life romance, and I just think it's written very well. That's almost about all I have to say about it. I really enjoy the characters in this show. It's just a fun, happy time. I haven't thought about it in a while, but it feels like something I'm going to rewatch, which is not something that I often do for shows at all. So that's saying something. And I did like the first arc quite a bit, but what everyone really remembers and what it excels at is like the Christmas arc, like near the end, and you have like this whole, you know, journey of relationships, essentially. The premise of the show being that our two main characters like each other's friends, essentially, and want to go out with them, so they kind of like are crossing wingmen, and, you know, we learn more about each other's lives, and yeah, I haven't seen it in a long time, like a couple years. Not a long time, but enough where it's just like, I don't remember the names of the characters, just kind of how I felt about it. And it didn't do anything particularly like groundbreaking in terms of like, you know, innovation or things that like just stick in my head psychologically. It just is a very solid show, a very cute romance show, and I enjoy how lighthearted it is. It's just one of those things that I really like that in shows, and just when I saw this, I was like, I really enjoy this, and, you know, everyone should see it. There's like, you know, cute beach episodes, that kind of thing, and I think it's everyone's alley. It's pretty much a universal. I think everyone will at least kind of like it. So, good show. So very quickly, now that we're on number 8, it's fucking Inferno Cop, which people will probably be like, why? Why is this on? Like, if you know what this is, you'll be like, why? Why would you ever put this on like a top 9 list? But I think it really represents like the ultimate far end of creativity given like time constraint. Because from what I understand is that during the production of one of Trigger's very important shows, I forget what it was, probably like Kill la Kill or something, maybe Little Witch Academia or something, they would have 1 hour a week to do like this passion project, which ended up being Inferno Cop, which is like 2-minute episodes, I don't remember how many there are, of just like moving PNGs with an incomprehensible story, but it is some of the most fun I have had watching a show, and it's so bite-sized, it's really funny. I've watched it a couple times, like 2 or 3 times, I think, all the way through, because it's just so short and so accessible. If you have not seen any of it, you might have seen like a meme from it or something, but, you know, I have a couple Trigger shows on here, a couple Trigger Gynax shows on here, and I think this one, it's like a special, like, if I have a friend that just wants to see something weird, something out there, I show them Inferno Cop. it's not even that super crazy, but it's just one of those things that I think anyone can watch on a base level and just be like, haha, what the fuck? But also, it does this really limited, like, animation thing in an entertaining way. I don't know. For how short it is, I also don't remember a ton of details, because the last time I saw it was a few years ago as well. You know, very recurring factor on this list. But the most notable thing is just like that animation, and I think it's just a short, sweet kind of pick, and it tells you like a lot about me as a person when looking at it, because it's just like, if I like this kind of thing a lot, you know, I'm kind of like a wacky person. Whoa, that's crazy. But, you know, most people would just write this off as like, wow, this is just a dumb meme show, which it is, but I love dumb memes. So, here it is. Number 8 is Inferno Cop, because I think it's funny. So this is night 3 of recording. This should be the last one, because I only have one show, but I saved it for its own night, because it was like 3 in the morning, and it's a big one. It is none other than Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is about on, I'd say, pretty much anyone's list. It is not a obscure show or anything like that. It's pretty well beloved, very impactful, revolutionary kind of show. And I think almost everything that has been said about it, or that could possibly be said about it, has been said about it. So I kind of was at a loss for words for a couple days on what to talk about, but I do have a couple personal experiences with it, in that I first saw this show, I feel like a lot later than a lot of people I hear about, which is like, you know, middle school or early high school, at least like between my friends. I saw this my freshman year of college, when I was 19, I believe, 18 or 19. And it was at a point in my life where I did not get out of bed. I stayed in bed every single day, maybe ate one meal a day, didn't even get out, like, for the bathroom a lot of the time, both because I was so depressed, but also because I was on a loft bed. So, you know, in this shitty university dorm room that honestly shouldn't be standing anymore. They keep saying they're going to renovate it, but they never tear it down. I'm not going to say where, but if you know me, you know where it is. It was awful. You had maybe 8 feet of space, and on top of that, when you lofted the beds, like they offered you to loft the beds to give you maybe 2 more cubic feet of space per bed. But as it turned out, they lofted you right next to the room light, so your room no longer got any light. Your bed was about a foot from a light, and so if you rolled over, you'd like bump into it, and I ended up knocking mine off the wall, and I couldn't get it back up, so I just slept with a light in my bed for the rest of the semester. This was not a fun time. I could have gotten maintenance to fix it at some point, but it's like my room felt like safety. I didn't want people coming in, that kind of a thing. I had, my roommate didn't really have anybody over. He more so went places than brought people back, so I was alone a lot of the time, and I ended up like not going to class freshman year quite a bit. But it wasn't like I was skipping or anything. It was like I was just in bed all day. Occasionally I would go to the bathroom. I don't think I showered. The longest I went without showering was probably a week, because I just never left the room. Didn't really brush my teeth or do any upkeep. I was just a sorry sack of human garbage, running away from my problems, which is all a build-up in service to, I finally thought, like, I've been hearing about Evangelion for years, I should just sit down and watch it. And if you know anything about Shinji Ikari, he runs away from his problems a lot, which is like the whole thing, the whole main, like, plot conceit of the show. And a lot of people don't relate to that and think it's stupid and hate the show. But in that moment, it was very cathartic, and I was stuck in my bed and I was numb to everything. So I was like, I might as well sit down and watch all of this. I watched it like dubbed, the old school dub from like '94, because this was before the Netflix adaptation came out and the Netflix like purchase of it, where it was like on Netflix. So I had to find this on some sketchy site, and I watched it all in like a day and a half. Just marathon the entire show, sitting in bed. It'd be like 2 a.m, I'd be watching Evangelion. Somehow I had not been spoiled on any of it. And honestly, I think when talking about the show, you can't really spoil people on it, apart from like very specific plot points. But the only thing that's important about that is it was kind of cool to see just where the direction of the show went, and it went very introspective, which, you know, I had thought about a lot. I hadn't really seen a lot in art at this point, because I always thought I wasn't very much of an art person. I grew up my entire life thinking, I'd go into math, be a physicist, that kind of a thing, and just that, a lot of the way that, like, my parents talked about their college art classes made me think that applied to art as a whole, where they were saying it's like, the curtains were blue, that meme, where it's like the curtains were blue, it symbolized depression, and then the artist says, oh, the curtains were fucking blue. It turns out, no, the artist wasn't just saying that, it's there to set a mood. It's not literally that, it means that she's sad, it's metaphorical, but the meme misinterpreted that, along with, my parents would talk about their college experience like that, where they'd be reading these, probably really highbrow novels, and they didn't like them. They're very smart, very artistically intuitive people, but I didn't know that very much. Just, this is my only interaction on that front. So I just thought, I wasn't an art person. I didn't get it. It was dumb. And the way that school teaches you is like, find symbolism, write about the symbolism, and it just very academic and not fun. So I just thought, I'm not cut out for this. There is artistic meaning behind certain things, but I shouldn't really dig super deep into it. And really, like, I should go with whatever appeals to me on like a core emotion, even if that's like junk food TV. Don't worry about analyzing art, because it's all like frou-frou bullshit, which is not the case. But, I could appreciate artistic movies as art, but I never found them entertaining or particularly connecting to myself. This is going off on a way different tangent, but essentially that was my viewpoint on life until I saw this show. There's something else I was going to say about this, but I can't remember it right now, so I'll come back to it if I remember. But Shinji in particular really, rang home for me. I very much related to him and his running away thing, not confronting your problems. It's not about, for anyone who doesn't get Evangelion, they think it's just, some guy that's just not fun to watch. But the idea is that you're supposed to relate to him being like this lost kid that doesn't know what to do with his life and is just running away from any sort of confrontation or responsibility. Rightfully so, because, his is a whole scale of, angels and invading monsters, and he's got to pilot a thing that traumatizes him. But that being said, his is still on a very top level, surface level. It is a conflict of the internal struggle, to do the right thing and face the problems you have ahead of you, which was a problem that was literally happening to me. I was avoiding my responsibilities in college because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. I was questioning my major, questioning my school choice, and basically the moral of this show, on that very base level, was get up. Gurren Lagann, I think, embodies this more, but Evangelion was just like, you you have to confront your problems and like love yourself, accept yourself, that kind of thing. But, you know, I saw this all in the course of like a day and a half, and I was depressed and not fully functional in my mind, basically, because I wasn't eating much, I wasn't sleeping well, I probably had sores on my body from sitting in bed all that time, but yet I would still say it's impactful enough to be on like this 3x3, because it just embodies so much of like who I am as a person, which is just good. It really just defined who I became as a person after freshman year. Even though I didn't get there initially, this kind of guided me in a way of just, you know, fight your battles and all that. Something I'm learning in this solo cast, this very first one, so you gotta take a lot of water breaks, because you're doing non-stop talking, and you gotta pause, because it's like the max I can do in one sitting is about 10 minutes, and then it's like my mouth gives out, and I have to take some water. But Evangelion just was very impactful, is a summary of that. Very poignant at that point in my life, and that's not even going into all the other characters. I really, cinematography-wise, I really enjoyed the idea of like those hanging shots and condensed shots where you would have, you know, a million images flash on the screen in a second, and you'd like be able to tell in the back of your mind like, oh, I processed all of that information, and like it, you know, it conveys this kind of manic tone that's just was really interesting. And it was the first example of, you know, artistic merit, I guess, particularly that resonated with me, where I was just like, oh, this is how my mind feels all the time. Just, you know, I'm so anxious. This is just such a perfect representation of that panicked thought process of just like, there's so much shit going on. And it wasn't, you know, maybe intended entirely that way, but it's how I connected it in my mind. I also related a lot to Ray, who is like this stoic, do it for like this parental figure at any cost kind of a character. She and Gendo's relationship is very toxic, and I didn't have anything like that with my parents, but my self-imposed view of like what my duties were, both to my family and my parents, as like the firstborn child, is like set a good example. Always do what you need to do, even if like it is at the cost of hurting yourself. I felt that a lot with just, you know, ramming my head into a wall. I felt like at school, and just, you know, going forward and not succeeding, and having all these classes I struggled at, where I just was not having fun. I was not interested. I did really well in high school and just kind of hit a wall in college, and even though Ray excelled at everything she did in Evangelion, she did it at the cost of like hurting herself quite a bit. And I'm not going to go into spoilers with that. I'm kind of keeping this one relatively spoiler free for plot stuff, but she just definitely is the like hitting your head into a brick wall kind of a person. And it really did feel like that at my point in life, and I kind of didn't realize how, it's weird, like I didn't realize how wrong that was, because I didn't realize that's what I was doing. It was all subconscious and something that just felt innate and understood because I had been doing it all my life. It's just now I was failing at it. And so that kind of challenged my core beliefs a little bit. And while I didn't really look at a lot of characters in that sort of depth at that same time, I've watched like a lot of analysis of this show and seen just like the ways I relate to all these other characters, you know, like the adults, and Asuka and Gendo and Misato. It's just like they're all broken people in some way or another, which I think everyone should be able to see a part of that in themselves. Maybe not to the extent of wholly encapsulating them in the way that like I felt as Shinji, on like all these micro details of how I was thinking was like, you know, this 14-year-old kid when I was 19, just because I had never taken that step of maturity. But I think it is important. You will see yourself in at least one of the characters somewhat as you watch the show, if you do like it. If you see all these broken people and you're like, no, I'm perfect, and you just, that's it, then you won't get anything out of it. Apart from maybe like it being kind of an artistic, monumental piece, but that's all it is on like a surface level. Because at its core, I think Evangelion is about its relationships with people, and just how, you know, eventually you get too close to someone, you hurt them, and how to overcome that. The hedgehog dilemma. Yeah, the hedgehog dilemma, as they would say, I think. I don't know if it was actually mentioned in the show by name, but I know it was quoted as an inspiration. And I'm not an expert on this or anything. I've very lightly dabbled. But yeah, Evangelion is very important to me. I don't know if it'll stay on the list or anything, but just for what it did for me, like in college, I think it at least deserves a spot. It was my number 9 because I haven't seen it in so long that I can't guarantee it would be on here, but it's just, it's very important and impactful, at least for now, in my memory. Also, the watermelon scene is incredible. Because I don't remember if it's exactly how it went, but in my memory, I have this very vivid picture of, like, this Evangelion wreaking havoc, like, in the background, while Kaji is just sitting down, tending to his little watermelon garden, and then Shinji walks up to him and is like, you know, what are you doing? And just that shot, to me, is so iconic. And I don't know why that one in particular stuck with me. It's like episode 15 or something, but just the tranquility amongst all the chaos just really resonated with me, I guess. So that's the only other thing I have to mention. That one didn't really come up. I don't like garden watermelons now or something. It's not like a big life-changing thing, but that's one of those things I really appreciate in just the filmmaking of it. The whole production of Evangelion is really interesting, but that's a whole story for another time. And I should eventually like compile all my Evangelion stuff into a full video, but this is just like a taste of it. This was only intended to be like a short hour and a half, 2 hour podcast, so that's pretty much all I have to say for that one. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. I'm planning on doing more of these. I don't know when the next time me and Nick will be able to record something, so in the meantime, I'm just gonna try to talk about one of these. Just make like a solo cast, probably not this long, maybe more in like the hour range every couple of weeks, just as like a fun side thing, because it helps me in that this reminds me a lot of streaming, and streaming reminds me a lot of solo casting, and I feel like they kind of benefit each other and just make me better at talking, which is something I want to improve on, so hopefully this will help me a little bit. Currently, I'm uploading a lot of stuff on my VOD page on YouTube. It's IAteMyPants Live. It should be in the description here. And then, of course, I'm still scripting stuff for the main channel. I haven't done that in a while. I'm kind of working on, I think I talked about this at the beginning of the podcast, but it's been a week now since I recorded that. I've been tinkering with scripts, but just kind of getting burned out, so my motivation was like to start on the really easy stuff, which is like creating thumbnails for existing, you know, stream VODs and, you know, posting them up as like Let's Plays, basically. Just, you know, 4-hour Let's Plays, basically, each episode, and just dumping them onto my channel, making that like a weekly thing, or like 5 a week thing. And then, next step was this, which is just more of a edited thing, where I'm going to edit this podcast a little bit, just get back into the flow of that, and then finally I should get into some scripted stuff. My first planned video is going to be that Ruby video that I've been talking about for like a year. I feel like I have a lot to say about it, but I also have just been like, I don't know how to present it. I'm like this close to figuring it out, and my angle changes every single time I rewrite it, because it started out like really bitter. Not in like a hating the show kind of a way, but just more in like a bitter around the discourse around it, because I feel like it's really been plagued by just internet syndrome discourse, or whatever you want to call it. And then it's slowly changed to like, if you notice how I talk about shows in here, just like, I feel like no one has covered the show on a macro aesthetic vibe kind of level of like what it's trying to say and represent. It feels like everyone gets lost in the weeds of it, so that's kind of the topic of it, I guess. But it's supposed to be a pretty big video because I'm going to go in depth on this macro level stuff and talk about the community a little bit, because I find the RWBY community very fascinating in a very destructive way. It's very chaotic, and reading over it, it's the only group of people that I've known to split between like stans of the show and haters, where they'll be like, we have to have our own subreddits, one where you can't criticize anything, and the other one where you criticize everything so relentlessly that you miss the point of the show. And there was a whole controversy within it where there was like a cross ban, like if you were in r/RWBY but also participated, like air quote, significantly in the RWBY Critics subreddit, then you would get banned on the main subreddit, because they're like, you're gonna be toxic. We know you're gonna be toxic, so we're gonna ban you preemptively. And so that was a whole shit show for about 2 or 3 days, and then the mod stepped that back. And it was just like one guy that went over the top, apparently, on the team. But it's like, I've never heard of any show's fan base doing that, like getting to that extreme. So I'm going to talk about that. And I think it is involved, interestingly, with how parasocial Rooster Teeth is as like a media conglomerate. Like the whole content involves like you knowing the people, so that's kind of the angle for that I'm taking. If that interests you, be on the lookout for that on my main channel in like a billion years, whenever I get to it. And like I stream on Twitch, and I think that's it. So I have like a bunch of socials also listed, like a Twitter, a TikTok. I don't really post on those as much though. I think I post Twitch highlights on TikTok, but that's about it. So if any of that interests you, cool. Oh, join the Discord. That's mostly where I'm active, is I talk in the Discord. I post stuff in the Discord, and very open to talking to fans, all that kind of stuff if you're interested in talking with me. Wherever you're from. I imagine most of you that are here, probably the High Guardian Spice thing, but, you know, wherever you're from. It's nice meeting you, so. I'm gonna get off because my throat hurts, and I gotta chop this down and make it listenable. I'm gonna keep a lot of the dead air probably, but not all of it. I'm gonna try to make it a little bit listenable. So, good night, and see you in like a couple weeks for the next one, I guess.